Hey folks, Randy here. So, a bunch of you probably don't know this, but I actually worked in the child welfare system for quite a while in the state of Maryland. I actually spent 6 years as a foster care worker, about 2.5 as a reunification worker, and 3.5 as a long term foster care worker. So, first couple of years I was there, my job was to try and get kids that have been taken out of the home back with their family. And then after that, the last 3.5 years, I was working with older teenagers who, for a variety of reasons, were never going to be able to go back home, and trying to get them ready for life after foster care. And so in the news, there's been some stuff going on with Department of Social Services and Social Services Administration. I read through some of it, and I thought my perspective might be interesting. I have some context that I think is missing from a lot of the coverage, so I figured we would go over one of the articles, and I read it and kind of give you my commentary on it, I guess, for lack of a better term. So let's pull this article up. Got this off of CBSNews.com. Maryland failed to protect children in state care from sex offenders, audit reveals. That does not sound good. A scathing audit finds Maryland Social Services Administration failed to protect some children in its care from sex offenders and did not provide basic medical and dental care to thousands of vulnerable juveniles. Now, the Social Services Administration, and this is just a foster care worker's perspective, Department of Social Services is a local department in your county who's responsible for taking care of foster kids, investigating reports of abuse. The Social Services Administration is an entire administration whose whole job is just to tell us how to do our job. In the 6 years I was there, I felt like all they really did was just make everything harder. But that's just my opinion. I'm sure people there felt differently. Senator Shelley Heddleman, the Baltimore County Democrat who chairs the Joint Audit and Evaluation Committee, told WJZ Investigates that lawmakers will hold hearings to follow up on these. Senator Heddleman said lawmakers must conduct due diligence to find out how we can ensure the safety and security of children. So you can read the audit there, which I did read it. What the audit reveals. Auditors found children may have been placed in homes with registered sex offenders. That's wild. Specifically, our audit disclosed that SSA did not have comprehensive procedures to ensure individuals with disqualifying criminal backgrounds did not have access to children in the state's care. As a result, SSA was not aware of the 7 registered sex offenders we identified that had the same address as an approved guardianship home housing 10 children as of August 2024, Legislative Auditor Brian Tannen wrote. Now that's crazy. I got to be honest, and I don't have any inside information on this, but I can tell you what this sounds like to me. There were some massive social welfare service companies that are in our area that their whole business is just, basically helping people that get medical assistance and providing them with all the kind of different services they need. And that's very costly to do. But a really, really cheap thing you can do is you can buy a rundown row home in Baltimore, fix it up, sort of, and see how many kids you can house in it. There are legal rules surrounding that. And then you can then make a ton of money basically running a really crappy group home. And the way you make the money is you just accept anyone that comes a calling. And, especially when you're working with older teens, you can get really desperate for, folks to take your kids. And it wouldn't shock me if it was one of those kinds of things where somebody licensed by the state, not actually working for the state, had a group home. Like it wouldn't even shock me if it was literally like a group home, like two houses like connected. And one house was a group home for foster kids, and the other was like a recovery thing or whatever it would be for sex offenders. Like that would not shock me at all. But that's horrible. They uncovered a lack of comprehensive background checks for providers and found that one employee of a foster care home had a prior conviction of sexually assaulting a minor. I guarantee you that was in Baltimore. And I'm not even, that's not even a dig at Baltimore City Social Services. That's a dig at some of these companies that are based in Baltimore that, I mean, they get the crappiest row homes they can find. They fix them as little as they can, and they hire the cheapest folks they can get. And I don't know the situation there, but that's just what jumps out to me. I don't have any actual information. This individual was subsequently charged with crimes involving children under his care. So that sounds like something else happened. The audit also highlighted children being housed in hotels and found that in one of those hotels, a contract worker had a prior murder conviction. Now, this, I really have no idea what that's about. When I worked in the foster care system, hotels never even occurred to me as an option. I don't think it was an option. Actually, when I was first reading this, I was thinking about independent living facilities, which are not actually facilities. They're actually apartments that get rented just in the community. And foster kids that go through like an interview process and are deemed mature enough are allowed to move into these apartments and learn how to live independently. I don't know what 18-year-old is actually ready to live by themselves in an apartment, but these kids are in rough situations. So, but then I also had situations where there were foster kids who no one would take. And, you were like, right, you were like at this situation where if we don't figure something out, like I'm literally going to have to either take the kid home with me or take him to a shelter. And in that kind of scenario, a hotel would have been nice. So this sounds like an organized hotel, like a program surrounding hotels that must have been something that started after I left. So it said a contract worker had a prior murder conviction. I just have no concept of what that even means. Baltimore County Republican delegate Kathy Szeliga said she was shocked and appalled by the revelations about the Maryland Social Services Administration and called for a criminal investigation. Which I got to tell you, man, like that's why you really got to mind your P's and Q's when you're working in the child welfare system, because if you mess something up, you can be facing jail time. I had a case where they were very convinced that one of my kids was going to kill themselves, and it was a very uncomfortable, lonely feeling because everyone that I worked with, it felt like, was trying to isolate themselves and provide like proof that they were doing everything they could so that if something went wrong, it was all Randy's fault. I had some very, very uncomfortable, cold conversations with the department lawyer and the director, and it was very much feeling like you were on an island, because if something went wrong, it was going to be bad. The agency is entrusted with protecting thousands of children in state care. Social Services Administration, who they're referring to, that feels strong. Most of those folks have never even worked in child welfare. I actually don't know that, but it felt that way. We need immediate change, like I said. Someone must take responsibility for a sex offender having access to 4 to 8-year-olds. A convicted murderer was working with foster children. It's heartbreaking. Okay, so that's crazy. Sex offender having access to 4 to 8-year-olds. Now, that almost makes me wonder if this was a scenario where the kids weren't in foster care, but because 4 to 8-year-olds would not be in a group home. There's just no scenario where that would happen. Now, I understand like many, many years ago that could have been a thing, but in Maryland, when you're that young, group home is not a thing. Convicted murderer was working with foster children. That is wild. He could have been reformed, but I mean, it's still wild, you know. Could have been a good guy. But I mean, you work with a lot of shades of gray type of folks when you're working in this system, but that's kind of wild. These foster kids come out of a bad situation, and we're trusting the state to take care of these children, and they're not doing that. Now, I do have a problem with that statement, and we'll kind of get into that further on, because I've never worked with a foster care worker that didn't care, or a child protective services worker that didn't care, or an in-home services worker that didn't care. All of them that I worked with, they worked their butts off, and if anything, they would more be on the side of caution when it came to kids. The problem is getting all the information into a computer system that can then be looked up and used in an audit doesn't always happen, and so it can make things look uglier than they are. Let's see. I had a thorough background check. They checked our bank statement. Oh, I'm sorry. Schlega knows the system, having once provided foster care herself. I had a thorough background check. They checked our bank statements. They looked at our tax returns. Were we doing this for the money? They weren't doing it for the money, I can tell you that. Did we have criminal background? I just can't imagine how the system has fallen this far. Yeah, I mean, like for when you're in group homes and things like that, like there is nowhere near the scrutiny that a foster parent gets. I mean, a foster parent, it's on a whole nother level. But if you're a staff member, I mean, I'm guessing it's going to be a lot tougher now. I guess we'll see. The audit also found that more than $34 million in overpayments were not recouped. You know what? I don't even feel bad for y'all. That's just what it is. Hundreds of children in state care were not receiving basic medical and dental checkups according to findings. That, I'm going to say right now, is not true. According to this, there are a total of 2,546 children that should have gotten a medical exam each year, of which 25% didn't, and 3,100 should have gotten a dental exam every 6 months, and 53% didn't. I'm just going to tell you right now, I don't believe that at all. When I was a foster care worker, my kids were going to the doctor. They were going to the dentist. Foster kids go to the doctor more than just about anybody you can see, because everybody's trying to cover their butt. So foster kids are always at the doctor. So I don't believe that they weren't getting a medical exam every year. I'm sure there is some percentage of kids that weren't. But what the reality of this is not that 25% didn't get a medical exam. It's that 25% didn't get a medical exam documented. And there's a huge difference. And the same thing with dental exams, which, you know, also like you had all kinds of situations with dental exams where it's like when they're getting in their older teens, like 16, 17, 18, like they start putting more responsibility on these foster kids to like schedule their own appointments and do it, which I mean, when I was that age, good luck trying to get me to schedule a dentist appointment. But then, trying to get them to schedule the appointment and then give us documentation proving that they did, and then getting that documentation into the computer system, it just ain't happening. So, I mean, it should happen, but it's just, insane. Because I can't just document that it happened. I need some kind of evidence, some kind of paperwork proving it happened. So I can tell you, like, the fussing about the medical exams and dental exams, that's nowhere near the issue that the numbers make it look like. These kids are seeing the doctor, but believe me, man. I mean, foster care is just a lawsuit and criminal charges waiting to happen. These kids are seeing the doctor. These kids in foster care are our most vulnerable children, and we must do better. Well, that's always going to be true. The state is essentially their guardian, providing basic protection, safeguards, healthcare, etc., and we're failing them, and that's really heartbreaking to see that these children who are in need, and we are not, as a state, able to step up to provide the proper care and protections, said Senator Clarence Lamb, a Democrat who represents Howard and Anne Arundel counties. Now, I got to tell you, like, that got into some weird areas, because when I was in foster care, they literally told us, like, hey, you need to treat these kids like they're your own children. And I did. And it turns out they didn't actually mean that. They actually meant you need to treat these kids like they're your own child, but like from a divorced relationship where you live in another state. So you just need to like make sure things are happening from afar, but like don't actually be actively involved. Documentation is more important than actually interacting with the actual kid. And I was much better at the interacting with the actual kid. And I had so many situations where I'd be like, all right, something happened. Especially like with the girls that I worked with. I mean, they got victimized isn't the right word, although sometimes it was. But they were definitely targeted by predators, all of them. And you'd get into situations where, like, I'd have a girl call me and be like, "Hey, I need help. I need to get you to get me out of here." And I would sit there and be like, "How would I handle this if this girl was my daughter?" Okay, guns blazing, and just all hell would break loose, and then I'd get in trouble. But so I guess my point in saying that is these kids are being taken care of a lot better than the documentation would maybe suggest. Because if I'm like the thing that was in my head all the time was, what's more important, to get my girl who is being trafficked pretty frequently by a guy, what's more important, to get her away from him or to write down that I need to get her away from him, or write down, like it was just, and it's like nonstop emergencies. So Lamb previously chaired the audit committee and said the same issues have been persisted for years. That's true. We tried to hold them accountable, and unfortunately from this last audit, we have seen these problems that are seemingly pretty deep-rooted and deep-seated continue to this very day. Things that are pretty basic, like criminal background checks, are not occurring on a regular basis. Areas where children need medical or dental exams, those aren't taking place either. Yes, they are. Those are things we found back in 2022, and they're still a problem today. Now, I will say, the Social Services Administration has a problem where it's like that, like that concept in Dilbert where some people are bad at their job, but not bad enough to fire. So the only way to get them away from your clients where they can do damage is to promote them to middle management where they can do the least amount of harm. And that is a concept that is alive and well at social services, in my humble, not at all humble, opinion. I saw that a lot. Just going to leave that there. Maryland Secretary of Human Services Rafael Lopez touted progress in getting children out of hotels while speaking before the state spending board last week. He said the state moved with great urgency. I wish I could comment more about the hotel thing, but I just don't know anything about it. Lopez noted hospital overstays have been dramatically reduced. I don't know what that's in reference to, but I can say, and I don't know how you're going to feel about this, I had a very close relationship with the mental health staff at a particular hospital in the state of Maryland. And I had a foster kid who was an absolute danger to herself most of the time. And I needed a safe place for her to go. And she may have gotten held at a mental institution a couple days longer than she should have been, because we were trying to find the appropriate place for her to go. Though it might be in reference to some of those types of things. And I stand by that, by the way, because that young lady was supposed to be dead before she turned 20, and she's now in her early 30s and doing quite well. So proud of that. We have focused like a laser on hospitals and hotels, which have been a challenge to Maryland for many decades, the secretary said. Social Services responded to auditors, maintaining that the safety and well-being of children is our highest priority. And that's not true. The documentation of the safety and well-being of our children is our highest priority. That's true. But for the lower level folks, the safety is by far the biggest thing. I can tell you, every single foster care worker, investigator, in-home services worker, all of us have been assaulted at least once. Some of us assaulted back. Not going to say who. Some of us did. But the safety of these kids has always been a massive priority for anyone that works there. I mean, the job's too hard. If you don't care, you leave, which is why people are constantly leaving. He also pointed to widespread staffing vacancies, up to 1 in 5 positions unfilled, and he said that can lead to gaps in care. If 20% of the workforce isn't there, yeah, that could be an issue. It's clear from the audit there are some very core functions of this agency that don't seem to be operating correctly, and that's a real failure on the part of this department. In a letter attached to the audit, Secretary Lopez wrote the following: "The safety and well-being of Maryland's children are our highest priority. As such, we take the findings of this audit with the utmost seriousness. In the 1.5 years of the 4-year audit during which I served as secretary, our leadership team has moved with urgency, challenged the status quo to not only with the Social Service Administration, but across the entire department. We are enhancing our internal quality control, dear God, raising standards and improving our information system of record to better monitor performance." I'm just getting I'm getting anxiety just reading that article, that sentence, because what that sounds like to me is we have created new redundant forms for you to fill out. We'll continue to move urgently in partnership with all 24 of our local departments of social services, state and federal partners to implement proactive solutions to resolve decades-old issues identified in the audit. We are fully committed to ensuring the highest standards of care and oversight in the administration of child welfare programs. Maryland deserves nothing less than world-class service. Well, they definitely are fully committed to ensuring the highest standards of oversight. I don't know about care, but oversight for sure. So that's kind of my perspective on this. Some of it sounds pretty bad to me. Some of it's not as bad. Like I said, I don't think the dental and medical thing are as bad as they're trying to make it out to be. I think it's mostly a documentation issue, but I mean, it's been a long time since I've been there. But when I was there, I mean, you were having to document everything using specific forms that had to be filled out specific ways, using computer systems that were 20 years old, and half the time just, stuff would just delete from the system. It was a nightmare. The unfortunate thing is a lot of the folks that are on the higher end this is just my opinion, and I'm not going to call any names, but like, they weren't people you necessarily wanted determining how this stuff would go. I know specifically members of the leadership team at Social Services Administration. I had some very close interactions with some of them, and I was very, very, very unimpressed with them. There were some life and death situations where we were trying to figure out what to do, and people that are now a part of that leadership group would be playing Candy Crush while we're discussing life and death situations, or I would have to repeat things because they were on Facebook while I was meeting with them one-on-one. And that's the kind of folks that are setting the policy. Now, I'm sure there's great folks at the Social Services Administration. Obviously, I don't know all of them. I don't even know most of them, but I know some of them. And it disappoints me that they're there. But oh well, if you have any questions, or if there's anything you'd like me to touch on or discuss, if there's like things regarding Maryland's child welfare system that you'd be interested in hearing about, I'd be happy to talk about it, because it's a topic I do enjoy talking about. So this is Randy. I hope this was informative and interesting. Have a good one.